Good morning, everybody. And my phone goes off in the background. I'm the director of the Centre for Applied Climate Sciences here in the University of Southern Queensland. We have approximately 20 staff in Southeast Queensland, Melbourne, and the United Kingdom. And our primary focus in the Centre for Applied Climate Sciences is to help people manage some of the risks they face from climate variability and climate change, and to help them seize any associated opportunities. And in order to do this, we conduct research, training, extension, product co-development, monitoring, evaluation, and adoption. And in addition to the 20 staff, we also employ a network of 10 climate mates right across Northern Australia who act as champions in the use of meteorological and climate science in decision making. And we also have 15 PhD students, both here and in Southeast Asia. And before I introduce Neil, I'd like to, on behalf of USQ, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, and we'd also like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And it's my pleasure today to introduce Neil Plummer, who is a friend and a long-standing colleague of mine. And Neil is a climatologist who's been immersed in the Australian and global climate community for more than 30 years. And he led climate services in the Bureau of Meteorology for over an 8-year period. And he now focuses on assisting organisations to capture opportunities and avoid costly climate risk exposure. And in 2019, Neil's climate work was recognised with the Pacific Meteorological Council Lifetime Award. And in 2020, he became a graduate member of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. And he has remarkably has master's degrees in not just science, but also business administration. And he also has a graduate diploma in not just meteorology, but also in computing. And today, Neil is going to be talking about, I'll leave it up to Neil to introduce his title. So over to you, Neil. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Scott. And thanks very much to Crystal, to Lewis and Kate as well for helping out with the logistics around this seminar. So there's my title, Navigating Business Through the Global Climate and Energy Transition. It is part of a business that I am involved in. I'll give some acknowledgements to others soon. But I would like to start with acknowledgement of country from this end too. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land from where I work this morning, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I also pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. I also welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present today. Okay, an acknowledgement, the organisation that I am a part of, Out of the Box Executive. A good part of this work comes from a partnership we've got with a Sydney-based company called Sustainably. And as Scott mentioned earlier, we're working up how can we best serve businesses to manage their risks and capture opportunities in this whole transition that we're experiencing now. So the agenda itself, and literally we could talk about these things for a full day, and it might be that at a later stage I come back and expand on some of these in a bit more detail. But first, I'm going to explain about the why and how we're going through this enormous transition. I'm going to start with a poll related to that, and then what do I mean by these risks and opportunities? Because these risks and opportunities are really the nub of what businesses need to deal with, and need to mitigate their risks and capture the opportunities that are emerging. I'll then talk about this framework that's been developed, a global framework for dealing with risks and opportunities, climate-related ones. It's called the Taskforce for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. So I'll touch on that. That'll lead into a discussion around how businesses can improve their own governance and their strategies to navigate the transition. And then I'll come back to your world, the climate science and services, where, well, what are the opportunities and challenges for people like yourselves that are emerging from this transition? And then I'll come back to a second poll. First things first, why and how are we undergoing this climate, energy, and circular economy transition? And at this stage, I've got a poll here, so I'd like to switch over to the team there in Toowoomba, to Lewis and Kate and Crystal, just to get this poll up and to get some responses from it. So the question is here: what would you say is the single biggest driver towards a rise in climate engagement or climate action from business? And thanks very much. They're up there. So let's run with this for a minute or so, and then we'll get back and have a look at the look at the results. And I'm going to submit an answer too. And just further to this, there may be something else you think is the single biggest driver. And if you identify something, hold the thought, because when we come at the end of questions and answers, we'll have a discussion around those. Okay, I hope you're all managing to pick something, or if not, hold the thought for towards the end of the seminar. Can the USQ team, do we have enough responses now to show the results? Okay. Let's give it a go. Can we show the results, please? And here we go. Oh, that's really interesting. The spread. Okay, so we haven't got a clear leader here, which is interesting. So it's actual the ones that are coming out on top with 27% of the around the physical risks to do with climate and extreme climate and weather events. That is tied with concern over legal risks. And then just behind those two are responding to their customers, which was actually my choice. There's nothing right or wrong here, of course. And the only other one that got above zero was a concern over reputational risk, which I think is tied into that responding to the customers. So that's interesting. I'm now going to so thanks very much, team, for doing that. We'll come back to a second poll towards the end. So with that in mind, I want to go through now the why and the how bits of the transition. Got this, one of my favorite quotes here comes from Al Gore. And you know Al Gore, former US Vice President and a really strong advocate for climate action. But this really struck home for me. He said back June 2017, the sustainability revolution has the breadth and magnitude of the industrial revolution, but it has the speed of the digital revolution. I think he's right there. A lot of businesses now are taking these sustainable development goals developed under the auspices of the United Nations. There's 17 of them, and businesses engage with these to different degrees. What the organization that I'm involved in, we pick out sort of 3 of these as being sort of the key drivers, but you'll find these days a lot of the businesses are reporting on a lot more, and some of them on all of these aspects of sustainability. So look at the 3 drivers that we're interested in here, and the first one is around affordable and clean energy. One trend we've seen in recent years is just the reducing cost of renewable energy. So this is taken from work from CSIRO. I'll just go through it quickly here. So what we're looking here is the cost in Australian dollars per megawatt hour of electricity generation. So we have the older fossil fuel technologies through here, so gas, various types of coal, and then those sources with carbon capture and storage. When you compare those with solar and wind and with batteries added, you find they're now turning out to be the cheapest source of electricity for that. And they're the Australian results. Similar results have been found around the world. Another interesting driver of the change is where investment is flown. So Forbes, this is an article from back in May earlier this year. Global renewables investment return 7 times higher than fossil fuels. So there are a few drivers on the energy side of things. The climate change ones have been much more familiar to you. This is a graphic taken out the Bureau of Meteorology CSIRO State of the Climate Report released late last year. I'm sure there's no surprises with these projections being shown. Obviously, the increased heat waves, longer fire season, more dangerous fire weather, rising sea levels, cool season rainfall decline in southern and eastern Australia, etc., etc. So we've got these very clear trends and projections which business have got increasingly aware of. What you might not be as aware of is some of the work that's come out of the World Economic Forum in recent years. And it's been a real interesting shift, I'd say, over the last 5 or 6 years, that climate-related risks have emerged to the very top, in the top 5 in terms of likelihood, in terms of impact for these risks. And these are economists, there are risk experts. World Economic Forum, not exactly known for its climate activism. But the really interesting thing I find around this is that climate-related risks are well embedded in the top 5 now. They're going to stay there for a while. In fact, those risks are only going to increase. Obviously, we've got things like the pandemic and infectious diseases up there, but let's hope that they don't stay in the top 5. But I can say with some certainty that the climate-related ones will do. Another driver is people's attitude towards climate change, and this was a huge survey that where 15,000 Australians were polled across 151 federal electorates. It was released just a couple of days ago from a group called Together We Can, in collaboration with the Australian Conservation Foundation. I'll just read out two of the stats here. We've got 67% of voters believe the federal government need to be doing more to address climate change. 65% of voters say Labour and coalition plans for climate action will influence their vote. So we've seen people's attitudes towards climate change strengthen, not just in the community, but in the business world too. So company directors now, they now have nominated for 2 years in a row as climate change is the #1 priority for the federal government to address in both the short and the long term. So that's been a major shift in terms of attitudes of people who sit around company boards. So there's two down. The third one is around responsible consumption and production. So we've all seen photographs like this, particularly the problems of waste getting into our oceans and so forth, and that's also a big driver of change that we've seen. So they're just a sort of snapshots of some of the answering the why questions, and here's more of the what and how things are emerging. So these are CO2 emissions, Australia and 3 of our biggest trading partners. They're the emissions without the land use component. So that's been actually taken out here. While Australia's emissions have grown since 2005, we have seen a reduction in the United States, European Union, and the UK. So we're seeing changes manifest in terms of emissions reductions in other parts of the world. Coming back to Australia, looking at the portion of energy that goes into our electricity generation, we're seeing this increase in renewables. So we're just short of 30% at the end of 2010, whereas the contribution from fossil fuels is still very high, but it's coming down. Clear message here. The direction of the energy transition is locked in, and it's really only the speed of change that's in question now. On the waste side of things, businesses, a lot of business now are shifting from that make, use, and dispose model of working to a much more reuse and recycling as much as possible, and looking not just in their business to make these changes, but looking right across their supply chains, looking from their suppliers, looking from how they source raw materials right through to the distribution side of things. So another big shift there. Okay, so that largely covers very quickly the why and the how of this transition. I want to focus now on what we mean by risks and opportunities. So before business decides what it wants to do, it needs to understand what it needs to respond to. And very key there is identifying what risks it needs to mitigate and what opportunities it can possibly capture. Let's start with risks. The physical climate risks, they can categorize in terms of acute and chronic. So flash flooding is an example of an acute climate risk, as is buckling of railways due to rail tracks due to heat. An example of a chronic climate risk is something like drought. So all familiar with those, I'm sure. The transition risks here, possibly much less familiar with, but I'm sure you would have heard about many of these. So they can be categorized in terms of policy and legal, in terms of technology, in terms of market, in terms of reputation risks. And I'll just give you some examples of each of these. In terms of the policy side of things, I mentioned this earlier, what's happening, what we're seeing with our trading partners, but we're now in a situation where we've got all G7 countries and 11 of the G20 members are aiming for net zero emissions by mid-century. And of course, these include our major trading partners. So some big shifts in national policy, and they're influencing, of course, the international policy side of things. And it's interesting in the polling that a large number of people picked up on this climate change legal risks. This is a graph. So this is from an organization, CCCEP, and the Grantham Research Institute, looking at the total cases of climate litigation with data up to the May of this year, but going right back to the mid-1980s. The red here is the US, and the gray are the other countries. Quick messages from here. Globally, the cumulative number of climate change related cases has more than doubled to 2015. Outside of the US, Australia is where the leading number of cases are coming from, with the UK and the EU following behind there. So we're actually seeing we've got data here showing this increase in the total cases of climate change litigation. On the technology side, we're seeing what is emerging is the risks of stranded assets. So we now have some of our more traditional energy generators now far less efficient than some of the new clean technologies that are coming online, and so concerns about risks over, as I said before, from the stranded assets. Market risk. So BlackRock here is the world's largest fund manager, and a very clear message coming from their chief executive for carbon-intensive companies to lift their game or be dumped by the world's largest fund manager. So that clear messaging coming from the world's largest fund manager around companies having to lift their game in terms of their climate risks. All right, opportunities. Often an opportunity is on the other side of risk. So we'll go back to BlackRock, Larry Fink, his messaging there. They also see opportunities from divesting from some older technology and then investing in more clean technology companies with potentially better returns. So there's that other side of the coin when it comes to risks and opportunities. The key ones that are looked at: resource efficiency, energy source, new products or services, changes in markets, and resilience. Building resilience of a company is seen as opportunity. And there are many opportunities when it comes to this climate and energy transition. This is a graphic from WWF showing the renewable export opportunities around Australia. We have some really big ones. The Asian Renewable Energy Hub in the northwest, where the bulk of that energy is planned to be used for large-scale production of green hydrogen products for domestic and export markets. But we've got opportunities, as you can see here, from right around the country. Just a few weeks ago, the automaker Volvo received its first delivery of fossil-free steel from steelmaker SSA AAB. So there's some real shifts happening in manufacturing towards using materials derived from clean energy. Jobs, particularly important when we're coming on the back of a recession. An organization called Beyond Zero Emissions will look very closely at potential jobs through the energy transition, and they come up with, in just 5 years, renewables and low emissions projects can deliver 1.8 million new jobs in regions and communities. And of course, this is the place where they needed more. Some real interesting work, and that's backed up from some of the work that's been done, for example, from the International Energy Agency. The last opportunity I have listed there was around resilience. So I could give lots of examples here around how to make how businesses can become more resilient. Brisbane Airport, third busiest airport in Australia. Well, they took the steps to raise their runway height 1.5 meters above the minimum regulatory requirements there. But there's tons of examples there about how companies are building their resilience because of climate change. I want to come back to this TCFD now. This is the framework that a lot of businesses are now following in terms of mitigating their risks. It was driven very strongly by somebody called Mark Carney. He's a former Bank of England governor. TCFD was established from the Financial Stability Board. That actually came out of the back of the global financial crisis. But key for the TCFD was to develop recommendations for more effective climate-related disclosures that could promote more informed investment, credit insurance, underwriting decisions, and the financial system's exposures to climate-related risk. So this schematic I've been building up here is one that comes from the TCFD. This is simplified. So for a business, as part of their strategic planning and part of their risk management, they're going to take in these risks and opportunities that are climate related. It's simplified, of course, because a business will also look at things like competitor and customer analysis, and not just the interest in the financial impacts, but impacts on a whole host of other things, such as reputation and so forth. So this is a bit simplified, and it does have an emphasis on the financial side, which is where the TCFD started from. And as a result of that, at the end of the day, a lot of businesses want to look at their impacts on the bottom line. Their financial statements. So that's sort of the framework with how TCFD started to focus on the financial sector, but it's far broader than that now, which a lot of the other sectors are taking on the TCFD. Again, this is a very simplified approach about how a business can work with the TCFD. Initially, ensuring that all this climate stuff I've been talking about, the climate and energy transition, that's taken account in terms of the governance of the organization. At a high level, define the scope of the analysis and have a quick snapshot look at the risks and opportunities for the business. Then drill down and identify 2 to 4 scenarios. And this scenario analysis is quite key to the TCFD, and I'm going to come on to this soon. What we mean by this scenario analysis. Then a deeper dive into the risks and opportunities and the impacts on business within each of these future scenarios, whether you choose 2, whether you choose 3 or 4. And then the real key is not just identifying the risks and opportunities, but how we're going to actually respond to these. What actions, what plans are going to be in place, and how do those responses then integrate with the strategy and the broader plans going further. And another important part of the TCFD is the reporting and disclosure. So that's a quick overview of the TCFD at a high level. Taking that, how can business improve their governance and strategies to navigate the transition? I come back now to the scenario analysis. Unfortunately, the IPCC, through the IPCC, have now adopted these shared socioeconomic pathways, SSPs. So these different scenarios looking at how the future may unfold. So the SSPs, we've got 5 key ones. 2 are looking at very low emissions, and we have 3 looking at 1 moderate emissions, 1 high emissions, and 1 very high emissions. And how these SSPs are differentiated are based on global population, on global GDP, on socioeconomic factors, on energy consumption, CO2 concentration, climate outcome, importantly about how things end up in 2100. So 2 of these scenarios end up with a temperature rise below 2 degrees by the end of this century, whereas the other 3 overshoot the 2 degrees, the 2 degrees threshold. So 5 different views around how the future may unfold. So as I said before, businesses select, and it may be 2, it may be 3, it may be 4 of these different scenarios, and they test their risks and opportunities and how they may respond through each of these different worlds. It's important in choosing scenarios is that they test the organization and they're diverse. So often, and what's recommended is an organization will take a more sustainable path forward and one that has high or very high emissions. So very quickly, again, I could talk for hours about this side of things, but we don't have time to do so, of course. Businesses look at risks and opportunities and how to respond to those. And I've just picked some examples from a medium-sized business in tourism. So you might find that business has done their analysis and come up with some response. And this is some typical responses they may come up with. And I'm going to go through these really quickly. A common one is reducing their carbon footprint, reducing their operating costs in terms of energy and water. There's opportunities out there for apply for grants and subsidies for energy and water efficiencies, increase their recycling, reducing waste, eliminate plastic use, use locally grown food where possible. In terms of physical climate risks, bolster up their health and safety practices, promote ecotourism, advocate for reforestation and forest protection. Again, climate robustness and resilience, develop flood mitigation plans, build resilience to attract lower insurance premiums, protect culture and heritage, strengthen partnerships with indigenous communities, advocate for climate action, partner with others who are taking the same action, disclose their progress in climate action in annual reports that will bolster their reputation. Right, now coming back to the climate science and the climate services world, what are those opportunities for climate science and climate services going forward? I want to now switch to the second poll where I've got some, the question is, you've got $10 million from the state government to invest over the next 2 years on climate science and services. to deliver the most benefit to small to medium-sized enterprises. What would be your highest priority investment? So I'll throw over the team now to show to get the poll up, and then we'll spend a minute just going through these. And I've looked at these 100 times, but I haven't actually chose one yet, so I'll do the same. Okay, well, team, I think it. If we can throw up the results.
Neil, before you summarise the results, just want to let people know if they have any questions, please type them into the Q&A, and then we'll read some of those out at the end of the talk. Thanks very much.
Excellent, thanks, Scott. Okay, so this second poll here, really interesting. So we do have a strong lead here: awareness and education on climate risks for business, and that's a long way ahead of better understand the climate drivers and physical processes. And for two others, we've got 5% for each of a one-stop climate risk website and improved global and regional climate models and downscaling. That's really interesting. Oh, sorry, we do have impacts and vulnerability assessments with 19% for. I won't tell you my answer because it's embarrassing. Actually, I'm not sure that anybody else actually voted for that. Okay, now we do have, in terms of providing climate science and information to the public, we do have some large national providers, of course, and I don't have time to go into all these different offerings. I will mention the one at the bottom left here, the Climate Measurement Standards Initiative, because that is an industry-led collaboration between insurers, banks, and scientists, regulators, providing standard professional service providers and support and power. So leveraging off very much the TCFD approach here. But to a large extent, these have been developed there's been no national plan to develop these, but what's emerged recently on the back of the Royal Commission into Natural Hazards is this concept of an Australian Climate Service. Now I was fortunate enough to work with two key people who were architects of this, potentially starting 4 years ago. So Carl Braganza and David Jones with the Bureau of Meteorology. It's morphed on since then. But this is a real opportunity to support better planning and preparedness for climate and natural hazards, and better response and recovery to disasters. I don't have time to go into the details on this one, but a key output from here may be connecting data in one platform for improving hazard and impacts in information. So watch this space with the Australian Climate Service. I talked about the CMSI before, but then following the TCFD standards, they have a number of recommendations there about their priority climate science needs. I won't go through all of these. The one at the top here, though, improving understanding of physical processes associated with climate hazards. There's a number here around extreme weather and climate events, including compound and cascading events, nationally consistent high-resolution projections, and use of up-to-date climate models. Now, this Fiedler et al. Paper that came out in Nature Climate Change earlier this year was also very interesting in terms of business needs from climate science and information. And there's a lot in that paper. A few snippets that I've taken out here. Risk assessment for climate extremes cannot solely be based on GCMs or RCMs. On some of their conclusions, GCMs need to resolve weather scales, establish weather resolving climate modeling more as an operational service rather than just as research tools. The real importance of building up this community of climate translators to communicate that information, the complexity down to non-experts, and then the more effective communication between business and climate science. So really interesting there. I just want to finish the talk before questions with just a summary. This transition is happening at rapid speed. It's happening everywhere. Businesses are really going to have to actively manage their climate-related risks and capture the opportunities to remain sustainable. The TCFD is a really useful framework. There are other frameworks around that I haven't spoke about here. Some businesses are aligning strongly with the TCFD, but many lack the knowledge, capacity, or will. And for the climate science and service providers out there, the opportunities are huge going forward, although there are still several challenges that remain. So I've gone a little bit over time now, but yeah, I'll hand back to the team. That's the end of the formal presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Neil, for a great talk. We'll now hand over to Louis and Kate to read out some of the questions. Thanks, Louis and Kate.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Neil. We have a couple of questions. The first one from Vivek is around energy consumption in Australia. In your view, is energy consumption increasing in Australia? And if so, what is the reason? And do you see a significant jump in the overall consumption in recent years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have all the answers for that. I don't have the statistics at hand. Look, we have a growing population. So energy, and in that regard, we've got those pressures and demand for energy. But we've also got greater efficiencies and energy efficiency out there. So there's that balance. You know, I suspect, without knowing the details, that the expectation is there for greater energy consumption. But yeah, I don't have the details at hand.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Neil. Another question from David Coburn. The red meat industry has a carbon neutral plan by 2030, and they're funding a large project to help meet that target. What are some examples from other industries in Australia doing something similar?
Sorry, Kate, which was that?
The red meat industry, so beef production and mutton and sheep, lamb.
Yeah. Well, it's happening in a number of different industries, and I touched on the Australian renewables hub up in the northwest of WA there, and one of the things I said they're looking to do is in the production of hydrogen. So the green hydrogen, that's definitely on the plans, but they're also replacing the energy that's used in the mining sector there with energy from green sources. So they have that. I have links with the water sector. and I know there's a lot of water agencies that are big energy users now that have firm plans to get to net zero, whether it's 2030 or 2040 or 2050. I have seen some in that sector targeting the 2030. Thanks, Kate.
Okay, thanks. Another question, this time from Nicholas Herald. Do you find it common that organisations do not use climate science or data appropriately or responsibly? If so, how do you deal with this?
Yeah, great question. That one. I think that's true. I think all this is happening at such a speed. There's a real catch-up going on. So I couldn't pinpoint, because I've largely looked at some of the best practice examples where there has been responsible use of climate information. I do believe, and this is where I hope the Australian Climate Service actually steps in to provide the more appropriate data and the better support there in how businesses can actually use that, because I think that's key, and it sort of come up in the polling we had there, where really key is that those knowledge brokers who can work with business about assisting them to use climate data and information in the most appropriate way, building up communities of practice in that regard. There is some way to go, because I think there has not been a huge uptake of climate science and data information in business until very recently. So, this has got, potentially 2, 3, 5 years to work through before we do see that maturity. I've seen some great examples of use. Lend-Lease is one company, but there are others around. There's a risk here. A risk that's been identified including in the Australian Institute of Company Directors around the potential for greenwashing here, to use the climate data and information in a way that isn't appropriate, but which makes the company look more sustainable than what it actually is.
Another question this time from Justin Peter. Given that the SSPs show little divergence until after the middle of the century, have businesses identified an appropriate set of SSPs? And following on from that, do you think it may be worthwhile to tease out extreme scenarios, for instance, an extreme heat event, to provide them with worst case scenarios rather than broad statistics? Yeah,
that's a great question, Justin, because it's just remind me of an aspect of scenario analysis which I didn't mention. So when I did talk about these SSPs, I thought it's important for businesses to use ones that really test the organizations to make the choice of scenarios very different. So a sustainable versus a medium to high emissions. But Justin's taken a point here, which is another aspect of scenario analysis, which is, I can't remember the exact term of it, but it's really testing them in a different way. So it's actually about looking at these very extreme, whether it's compounding or cascading events. So not just looking at how temperatures are at a certain period of time in decades ahead, but saying, well, these are events that could happen, and let's assume that they have happened, and let's look at those risks and opportunities, and it's largely downside risks here, on the organization and how they could possibly respond to those. So that's thanks for bringing that up, Justin.
Paul Holper says he'd like you to comment, I suppose, on the potential impacts of COVID on business preparedness to tackle climate change. On one hand, we're seeing reductions in emissions worldwide, but COVID could represent a major distraction from emission reduction measures.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that question, Paul, and good to hear from you as well. Yeah, COVID, it looks like globally, I don't know the latest statistics, but the reduction in emissions from COVID around the 6 to 7%. They're not going to be permanent. We're going to see a bounce back to sort of business as usual emissions, at least in the short term. A lot of people thought that COVID would actually be a huge distractor for climate action, that business with having to take action, urgent action around COVID would put climate on the back burner. That doesn't seem to have occurred. There seems to be this more of a realization is that, COVID has opened people's minds as to these real, very extreme, low probability events can happen. They can happen globally. They can happen in every country. And climate change is another one of those. So I think, if anything, businesses have actually, it's turned their attention to this other extreme event, which they may have considered as low probability, but is actually much higher probability. So I don't think COVID's been a distraction. I think it's actually, on balance, probably engaged more businesses on climate change. Thanks, Paul.
Another question, this time from Daniel Kippen. What's the risk that sustainability reporting turns into a bubble? It simply adds to the burden of small to medium businesses who realistically have minimal material impacts.
Another great question, because of course those companies that can really invest in sustainability reporting are those ones that have the most resources. And I've read some of these sustainability reports from very well-resourced companies that, 50 pages long sustainability report, but at the end of the day, they don't have plans to reduce their emissions at all, and not even scope 1, scope 2 emissions, let alone getting on to scope 3 positions. So I think emissions. So that's really a concern. One thing I said earlier is when it comes to, we've got these sustainable development goals, there's 17, are really difficult for small to medium enterprises to report on all of those goals. Key to them is to choose the right ones and to choose and report on those responses, those actions that make the biggest difference in terms of their long-term sustainability. And this is where the frameworks I've talked about can really actually help to get it, though, not just identify what responses are needed, but have frameworks to identify which are the really high priority ones. But there's certainly that risk. It lends itself into greenwashing, which I spoke about earlier, where some companies are actually potentially given the appearance of doing a lot to become more sustainable just on the strength of their glossy sustainability report.
And I think probably the final question, Neil, from Tim Cohen this time. Given next year's federal election is likely to be dominated by issues around COVID, how can we make climate action, emission reduction and energy transition a bigger issue at the ballot box?
Yeah, I think it's really important here to hold representatives here to account on climate action. and there will be several organizations that will be reporting on the credentials of our political parties and those representatives about what they intend to do on climate action. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it this time round than what we have in the past. My own view, without a credible strategy and plan for climate action, then we're really just piling on further risks for future generations. And I'd like to see messages like that get far more airing in the communities, and that accountability. I've spoken about business here, but it becomes making our representatives in government far more accountable for the future, for the climate in the future, than what has been done in the past. Thanks, Kate.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil. I think that's all of the questions. So I'll hand back to Scott, I think, to close up.
Great. Thanks very much, Kate. Thanks again, Neil, for a great talk. We really appreciate the time and effort you've put into the presentation. Thanks, everybody, for a very stimulating and informative Q&A. And additional thanks to Kate, Crystal and Louis for organising the event and facilitating the event. And a special thanks to everybody who's online for participating this morning and participating in the surveys. We'll be interested to look at those more carefully after the event. And I wanted to draw your attention to our next seminar, which will be given by Dr. Chris Hewitt at the UK Meteorological Office, who's also formerly affiliated with the Centre for Applied Climate Sciences at USQ. And he'll be talking about climate services for managing societal risks. And that's on Wednesday, the 15th of September. And as a once-off, it'll be a bit late because he's in a different time zone, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m, Wednesday, the 15th of September. So I hope you can join us for that. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.